To love truth is to endure the void. That disarming sentence, offered by Simone Weil, opens a door into the life and thought of one of the 20th century's most troublingly beautiful minds, Simone Weil. She lived only 34 years. Yet in that brief span she refused easy categories. Wealthy by birth yet intent on living among the poor. Intellectually brilliant yet physically fragile. A radical in action who became, in spirit, a relentless critic of all power. Her life was a study in coherence and contradiction, and in the cost of living according to principle. Simone Weil was born in Paris on February 3, 1909, into a highly cultured secular Jewish household. From childhood she displayed exceptional intelligence and an austere moral seriousness that earned her schoolmates' nickname, something like the categorical imperative in a skirt. She was frequently ill and, as a child, was made physically vulnerable by repeated illnesses and a household that guarded her from ordinary contact. That early isolation helped shape her later reticence toward intimacy and her almost ascetic relationship to the body. She studied philosophy in Paris, completing a thesis on science and perception, and began teaching in high schools. But academia never contained her. In the early 1930s, Weil plunged into social struggle. She supported labor movements, participated in strikes, donated portions of her salary to the unemployed, and in a radical gesture of solidarity, left teaching for a time to work on factory floors, including stints at Renault. Those months of manual labor were not an experiment in exoticism. They were a patient investigation into the dehumanizing rhythms of industrial life. From the shop floor, she drew two convictions that would become central to her thought. Power is morally corrosive, and spiritual attention to the human person must accompany any political claim. At the same time, Weil's life bent toward religious experience. A trip to Portugal in 1935 left her shaken by the sight of poor fishermen at prayer. She described the scene as almost mystical. Christianity, for her, ceased to be merely an institutional allegiance and became a language for the oppressed, a way of naming solidarity with suffering and the radicality of humility. Yet Weil refused easy confessional commitment. She criticized churches when they took on the trappings of power. For her, Christ was less an ecclesial figure than the emblem of sacrifice and attention to the weakest. Weil's writing remained, in the end, an attempt to weave ethics, spirituality, and political clarity into a seamless life. She rejected both dogmatic Marxism and the complacencies of bourgeois reform. Marxism, she argued, exposed real injustices but could reproduce domination under new banners. Any ideology that reduced persons to functions in a system betrayed human dignity. Her solution was not a program of state-building, but a radical reorientation of attention, a culture of duties toward others rather than an atomized struggle for rights. In essays such as those later collected in works like Gravity and Grace, Waiting for God, The Need for Roots, and The Working Class and the Intellectuals, many published after her death, she explored what it means for humans to be rooted without becoming enslaved, to belong without losing moral freedom. When Nazi Germany invaded France in 1940, Weil's family fled. She briefly went to the United States but chose to return to Europe and to the struggle. In London, she worked with the Free French, drafting plans and supporting resistance efforts. Her devotion to solidarity became literal and severe. In solidarity with the occupied and starving people of France, she chose to live with extreme privation. Already frail, she began restricting her food intake to share the suffering of her compatriots, a decision that worsened her health. On August 24, 1943, Simone Weil died in a sanatorium in Ashford, Kent, officially of tuberculosis. Her physicians believed that malnutrition and deliberate self-deprivation accelerated her decline. Buried quietly, her death passed mostly unnoticed until after the war, when thinkers such as Albert Camus drew attention to the startling unity between her life and her philosophy. Camus admired in her an unyielding fidelity to conscience, the absolute consistency, he said, between thought and deed. What makes Weil still arresting is that her philosophy never treated truth as a comfort. For her, attention, the disciplined capacity to see the other, to feel the injustice of structures, to bear witness, was the core practice of the spiritual life. She argued that human dignity resides not in rights alone or in social rank, but in the simple fact of existence. Every person is sacred by virtue of being a living being. From this starting point, she insisted that political work without spiritual conversion becomes mere technocracy. Likewise, spiritual withdrawal that ignores the actual suffering of others is a betrayal. Her life asks hard questions of us now.
How far will we go to reduce the distance between belief and action?
Can we refuse power's seductions without falling into quietism? Weil's answer was uncompromising. Truth will demand of us something like endurance of the void, of the loneliness that often accompanies moral clarity. But that endurance is not an abstract heroism. It is a daily discipline of attention, a willingness to enter the lives of the oppressed, and the courage to let one's life be reshaped by that encounter. Simone Weil's brief life is a challenge and an invitation. It challenges us to measure our convictions by our deeds. It invites us to make attention the first political act. To read her is to be reminded, painfully and beautifully, that truth is rarely comfortable, but it remains the only doorway to an authentic life.